Hey, Aaron, it's Kendra. I'm the only one adminning the meeting, but I think we'll be okay, but just a heads up.
Okay, thanks. I was gonna shoot you a quick email, but maybe it's easier just to chat that there are going to be a couple of people attending that we had emailed about that might need to be promoted from attendees to panelists. One is Kate Dinsmore, who'll be presenting for the East Missoula Highway 200 corridor. So when that agenda item is getting close, or we're getting to that, maybe you could just promote her quick. Does that sound good?
Sure, as long as she comes in hopefully as Kate versus, just a phone number, then I might not know, but
Oh, right. She should be connecting as herself. I'll try to make sure that we get that, and I'll just shoot you an email.
okay.
Specific number or name.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
You made it, Dave.
I made it. It went quicker than I thought it would.
Great.
Hi, Marita.
Hi, Dave.
You can still chair if you want.
Oh, no, you do it.
So, Dave.
So what's the story here? What's different today?
We're in a Zoom webinar.
We're in a Zoom webinar. Okay.
Yep. So people can join directly there. You should see a list of panelists and attendees.
I see oh yeah, there we go. Never mind.
Yep. And so during public comment, the attendees will be able to raise their hand and you can unmute them directly to provide their comment. So we don't have to have people join via a phone number anymore. So that's largely the biggest difference. Kendra, anything that you have to add as far as process for the webinar versus previous Zoom meetings?
No, that's the biggest thing is the attendees. A blue hand will show up in the attendee title saying that somebody in a public comment or something the public has a question. So that'll tip you off to that. But other than that, I don't think so.
And so, Kendra, we probably want to make Dave a meeting host so he can unmute attendees as he calls on them. And I do know I just saw Donnie arrive in the attendee list, and he's here if we have questions about the first agenda items related to the TIP and LRGP amendments. So if we have questions during that section, we could call Donnie. Donnie could weigh in on those.
And we're on YouTube also, right? Were we before?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
So David, sorry, if you can see in the attendees, Donnie's raised his hand.
Let's see here. Hang on a second. You know what? I am not seeing that.
It's under if you have the participant, or I think he lowered his hand. It's not raised anymore.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I am not. When I click on the attendee button, I am not seeing the names of any of the attendees. I just see a number in parentheses, 3.
Oh.
Is there something that needs to be activated somewhere else for me to access that?
I don't think so.
You have
Dave, there's a button that says view attendee list and you'll get another window.
Really? Where is the button that says view attendee list?
Well, so I'm using an iPad, so it may be different, but at the bottom of the participants list, there's attendees 3, and then there's a prompt to view attendees list.
And when I have the participants tab open, if you click on attendees, it should switch over to the attendee list. And if it doesn't work, we can we can have admin, or admin can make me a co-host, and I can do the mute and just help facilitate the public comment, if that would be helpful, Dave.
Yeah, let's just do that until such a time as I can get the kinks worked out in the technology here. Maybe it will remedy itself during a slow point in the meeting. So
great. Yeah, it looks like I've got the ability to allow folks to talk. So I'll just monitor that during, and just let you know when there are public comments or someone raises their hand.
okay.
And facilitate for you.
All righty. Well, let's go ahead and get rolling then, so as not to keep folks waiting. Let us begin with, let's see, calling the meeting to order. This is our November 17th Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee meeting. Thanks to everyone for joining. It seems like we just had a meeting here not that long ago, but here we are again. Let's do a roll call, and I will name off the voting and non-voting members of TPCC, and just let us know if you are here. Mirta.
Present.
Merringen.
Here.
Don MacArthur.
Here.
Lucia Oliveira.
This is Ryan Hammond here for Lucia.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Commissioner Josh Slotnick. I am Dave Strohmeyer. Missoula County Commissioner. Bob Vosen.
Here.
Hi, Bob. And Debbie Johnston. No Debbie. Okay.
Yep. Debbie let me know she was going to be missing this meeting, so she'll be
okay. No problem. And as folks might have gathered by the initial conversation at the beginning of this meeting, we are trying out, at least for TPCC, a new Zoom webinar format. So my apologies if I'm fumbling around a little bit trying to figure this out as we go. Approval of minutes. We have minutes from October 20th. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Okay, seeing none, those minutes will stand approved. Is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda? Seeing none, we will roll into our new business today. We have a few items, a couple of which are action items. And I would just remind folks, if you are out there tuning in and you have a question, please raise your hand, and we will get you in the order in which you raise your hand to say your piece. So to begin with, let's have a review and an opportunity to approve Amendment number 5 to the 2016 Long Range Transportation Plan. And it looks like, John, you will be presenting this to us.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. One moment while I share my screen. Can everyone see that all right?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. This is John with the MPO. I'm here today to have TPCC consider Amendment 5 to the 2016 Long Range Transportation Plan. So this is a two-step process. The first item on the agenda is going to be about the LRTP, and then after that, we'll move on to the Transportation Improvement Program amendment, but they both pertain to the same projects, but both of these need to go through this process. So MDT, the City of Missoula and Missoula County collaborating to complete an intersection project at the Mary Jane and Broadway. Initially, the city and county agreed to work towards transfer of highway safety improvement program funding directly to the build project. The proposal to transfer funding from to the build grant from HSIP was prohibited. Additionally, when reviewing project schedules, it was learned that if a signal is going to be constructed in conjunction with the build project, steps would be needed to take in immediately. So this is the first step in the process, is to recategorize project 15, which is that intersection project, to the committed project list from the illustrative project list in the 2016 LRTP. And then, as I mentioned, as well as list the project in the Missoula Transportation Improvement Program. This is a map of the area where the project will be. The project scope includes installation of a signal on the future Broadway and Mary Jane intersection, along with the reconfiguration of existing Broadway and Flynn Lane intersection to eliminate the left turn from Flynn Lane to West Broadway. Providing a signalized intersection at West Broadway and Mary Jane Boulevard effectively reduces traffic pressure off of Flynn Lane, which will be reclassified as a local street. Although initial design concepts for the build grant recommended a roundabout at this location, separation of HSIP funding from the rest of the build package increased likelihood that the two projects would not be delivered to construction simultaneously. Intimate development, including the VA hospital, is necessitating intersection access to be available by November of 2021. Construction phasing between the build and intersection improvement project is much more effective and possible with the signal intersection. While the roundabout intersection was initially recommended, the signal intersection was also acceptable at operating at high levels of service. For these reasons, the signal intersection is now the selected design option. The total estimated project cost, $12,000 for clinic PE, and then upwards towards $700 for CN, which includes CN, and then again, $12,000 for IC, as well as $150,000 local funding that was contributed to this project as well. Here is an aerial photo of the area, and you can see where the new VA Center is going to be, along with other development. The red is the extension of Mary Jane Boulevard up to Broadway and an approximate location. And then where the orange dot is where the Flynn Lane intersection will be a right turn only. This is the appendix to the long-range transportation plan. So you can see that intersection improvements has been moved from recommended to committed projects. So staff recommendation, approve Amendment 5 to the 2016 LRTP as proposed. Option 2, do not approve the Amendment 5 to the 2016 LRTP. So I'd like to open it up for discussion, and we have some MDT folks on the line if there's some questions that I am not able to answer.
Thanks, John. And I believe Commissioner Slotnick has joined us. He at least sent me a message that he has. I don't see his name listed here, but
I just promoted him to a panelist. He was in the attendee. He was sitting in the audience, and so I've promoted him to the meeting.
okay.
He will have joined us now.
So I'll break the ice for questions here. John or anyone with MDT, feel free to jump in here, or Aaron for that matter. Could someone describe what it is that apparently has precluded the use of HSIP funds for the build grant, or to be folded in that way?
So my understanding is that, so they're both federally funded, but both programs have differences, including funding requirements that just make it impractical to simply transfer the funding, and that could potentially inadvertently add additional federal requirements to the build grant.
Yeah, Commissioner, I can maybe speak to that a little bit. The short answer is that there are administrative hurdles on our end. We explored the possibility of converting these HSIP funds to build funds, essentially, like you said, wrapping it up in that project, having the county administer both pots of money in both projects. There are financial mechanisms we can use to accomplish that, but in the end, it comes down to the responsibility for those funds that have to ride along with it. And in Missoula's case, there are provisions for the state to certify the county. I mean, you have some experience with that, I know, to carry out projects on the state's behalf with federal funds, but that's not something that we have in place here in this case. And so there just wasn't any clean mechanism to transfer responsibility for those funds along with the funds themselves.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other
And I do want to
questions?
mention, oh, sorry. I just want to mention one more thing that I forgot, that this project does not preclude a roundabout to be installed in the future. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind.
And what was the difference in price between what we'd be looking at for the signalization of the intersection versus a roundabout? My understanding is it's significantly more for the roundabout.
Yeah, that might be a good question for Donnie, since he's been involved in those cost estimating. So Donnie, you should be able to talk now, Donnie.
Donnie?
Hey, everybody. Aaron, maybe I'll do a mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, coming
Hey,
through.
good afternoon, Dave, everybody. Yeah, I can answer that question. When we priced in everything to that 30 to 60% level, we were at about 1.7 million for the roundabout upgrades versus about 500,000 to 600,000 for the signal upgrades. So that's kind of where we landed. I mean, clearly the roundabout was a more expensive option. And as John already alluded to, it was also a lot more challenging to phase. So, depending on the timing and implementation of these two projects, if we were to build Mary Jane North and have the connection to Broadway by the end of next year, when the VA is going to be needing that and starting to generate traffic, that's estimated to be November 1st of 2021. We wanted to have that obviously open, and if things were lingering and still moving through design phase, roundabout design, and we would build, say, a stop controlled intersection there and then later convert that. It was a lot more challenging to convert from a stop control to a roundabout than a stop control to a signal, and also more expensive.
Thanks, Donnie. Other questions, comments from the committee?
Dave, this is Don. This may be super clear from something that I missed, but absent the HSIP funding, is the money coming from the build grant?
Anyone want to tackle that?
Well, we've got Jeremy on the call too, and Donnie can maybe help answer. But if the question is, could the funding from the build grant do the intersection without HSIP funding? Is that what you're asking, Don?
I thought HSIP funding was prohibited for use, so something's paying for it. What is it?
So what this is essentially doing is this amendment would be programming the HSIP funding to do the signal at the Mary Jane Boulevard Broadway intersection as an independent project, not as part of the build grant. So it's moving ahead as its own HSIP funded project, as opposed to just being wrapped in and part of the build grant. So it's we effectively have two projects now rather than all of it being wrapped into the build grant.
Got it. Thank you.
Jeremy, you had your hand up. Do you want to elaborate on that, or did you have another question or point?
Thanks, Commissioner. I can't find my virtual hand. I had to raise my real hand.
I saw that. Nicely done. Old school.
Thanks. I just wanted to acknowledge MDT really worked hard to incorporate the HSIP money into the build project for us in the timelines that worked. So they moved up funding so that we can get this intersection done in the same time frame as the build grant. It just didn't work out to combine them. But this is the next best thing, which is getting two projects going simultaneously, so that we get a full improvement at that intersection. The other thing it does is it lets us use the build grant money elsewhere, because this was originally part of the build grant to do this intersection, and by using the MDT HSIP money, we're able to move some of that money elsewhere. And as you know, we didn't get all of the grant we asked for, so that really helps us.
Thanks. Mirta?
Yeah, I might have missed this, but just to be clear, we're doing a light, not the roundabout at this time, and we are using HSIP. And is that funding going to cover the entire cost of it, or is it a local match?
Jeremy? Aaron? Anybody else?
Yeah, as far as the question, yes, this is using HSIP to construct a signal at this location, and the construction of that signal is being funded 100% out of HSIP is my understanding. But Jeremy or Donnie, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, that's right. So MDT has agreed to construct the signal, and what we've agreed to do is fund the design work for that, so that we can use our same consultant to get the design ready in the time frame that we have. So it's a good partnership.
And just quick follow up: the total cost of the project is about 600,000. Is that what you said?
Closer to 700.
Okay. And the engineering work that's what's in the presentation? Is that the 12,000 or? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
Sorry, just need to clarify that. So the 12,000 is engineering related to the construction work. Construction
Okay.
engineering, we will fund the design engineering out of the build grant money. We'll absorb that into the design work that's happening for the build grant.
And how much is that?
I don't know the exact number on that.
Okay.
And looks like Jacqueline has a comment from the attendee list. So
Go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, what Jeremy stated is correct, but we do have a small portion of design funds programmed for this safety project, and that's just for us to compile the plan set at the end for advertisement. We don't expect it to be a lot, but we just have a little bit in there for when the handoff comes from the county to us and then us out to the contracting community.
and you'll see that reflected in the TIP amendment, that there is some federal state funding going to that PE phase when we get to the point where we're considering the TIP amendment. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but you'll see that in the next item.
Thanks. One other question, Aaron, you and I discussed this the other day, and I don't know whether you were able to gain any clarity on this, but I've seen elsewhere, and I can't recall whether this might be something that exists at as you approach the intersection of Airway Boulevard and Broadway, or certainly this is what you see down at Highway 93 South and Blue Mountain, where there's the speeds along those sections of roads are high enough that it justifies or warrants an advance warning signal that will clue the driver into the fact that the light is changing. Is that at all something that is part of this project or contemplated?
Yeah, so I'll let Donnie and Jacqueline weigh in on that with more detail, because we did chat about that, and it was considered but not deemed necessary at this intersection. So Donnie, you should be able to jump in now.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to add, actually, Aaron, other than that certainly has been kind of an initial part of the scoping of the signal in working with MDT. there's really good sight distance. The speed limits are, posted 55 through this corridor. There's signals on both sides of the, in relatively close proximity to this location on both east and westbound sides of this signal. So that was not initially looked at something that was needed here.
Okay. Thank you, Donnie. Other questions, comments, or motion?
Dave, it's Josh, I just had a question, and
yeah,
I definitely see the financial logic around this. I was wondering if Donnie or Jacqueline could speak to the safety considerations of a signal versus a roundabout in this specific location.
Donnie?
I can jump in and maybe add on to my comments here, but that's a really good question, Commissioner Slotnick. And I would say that, the build project as a whole, as we prioritize safety top of the list for these upgrades, and is largely why, well, that in addition to, good operations that the roundabout intersection selected along the Mullen corridor. But in this corridor, there's certainly the same element of the roundabout in terms of it being a really good, safe design when looking at right angle crashes. But the signals, it's also a really good intersection too, and operationally it actually performs slightly better than the roundabout here. And with this project, I would tell you that there's also going to be some upgrades made to restrict movements over where Flynn Lane is currently. And that'll, protect that intersection, especially restrict movements taking left turns headed, westbound on Broadway. So that'll make that intersection much safer as well. So I think we feel pretty confident that the overall upgrades here are going to be much safer than they are today. In that this is a really good option as well.
Great. So Donnie, are you basically saying we're not losing anything safety wise by taking the signal intersection route instead of a roundabout?
Yeah, I think you could definitely look at the roundabout as being, a slightly safer option. But again, you have to consider that this is the proposed roundabout here is a multi-lane roundabout. And those operations are a little more complicated than a lot of the single lane roundabouts that we have in town. So there is a diminished, benefit there in terms of property damages and traffic accidents as well. So I think that the roundabout ultimately is, it is a slightly safer intersection in terms of, right angle crashes. It's hard to argue that, but given everything we're looking at, we're absolutely upgrading it. It's going to be much safer overall than it is today. And it's everything considered, it's a safe intersection.
Thanks.
Don. Anyone else? All right, Don?
I'd move that we approve amendment number 5 to the 2016 LRTP as proposed.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
That was Bob Vosen. Any further discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes. On to item number 2. This is review and approval of amendment number 2 to the 2020 to 24 Transportation Improvement Program. John.
I'm back again. So this amendment is basically adding a new project to the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So you can see that line item on the bottom and the funding breakdown with the total just over $700,000. So the just here for you to consider adding this to the HSIP table. And this, along with the other amendment, will move this project along. So
Thanks, John. Any questions, comments, or motion?
I move that we approve amendment number 2 to the 2020 to 2024 TIP as proposed.
Thanks. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, very good. There's been a motion and it's been seconded. Any further discussion on this? Any public comment?
I have one quick comment,
Yeah,
Dave.
Bob. Yeah, you bet.
And I just want to thank everybody for all the hard work, both MDT staff and city MPO staff, Donnie, that went into making this happen. This was, and Jeremy really hit the nail on the head. This was a real good piece of work by everybody for the public to make sure that we come up with a safe intersection. And we found a way to get through a kind of an unusual situation by working together. And I'm just really, really happy to see the teamwork that took place and everybody not saying just no, but let's figure out how we can make this whole thing happen. And I just think it was a great job by everybody involved.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. And it will clearly stretch our dollars, our limited build grant dollars also, which is a good thing. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is a done deal. Thank you, John. Next, we have a presentation and review of the draft preferred alternative for the East Missoula Highway 200 corridor plan. And do you want to kick this off, Aaron?
Yeah, I'll do a quick introduction, and then we have Kate Dinsmore's joining us from WGM Group. She's the project lead on this, and so she'll be able to walk us through a presentation. But just by way of introduction, this project has been ongoing for about a year now. We're sort of entering the final stretch of getting the design nailed down and getting the final report pulled together. And so we just wrapped up our most recent public engagement on this corridor, and Kate can talk a little bit about that. But I think we're landing on a preferred design and excited to get this in place and then start working on funding and other details to see how we can move it along. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Kate to walk us through where we're at and what's in the final design.
Thanks. It's all yours, Kate.
All right, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Aaron's saying, we're talking about the preferred alternative today. We presented this to the public at a virtual open house on October 22nd. We just closed the 3-week public comment period. And overall, we've received positive feedback. So we're really excited about that. We don't see any comments that are going to cause big changes to the preferred alternative, but we know there are a lot of details that will need to be worked out during the engineering design phase of this. But as far as a planning level concept, we feel really good about it. So just to remind you, the corridor includes the area between Buren on the west end and Tamarack on the east end. It's divided into 3 segments: East Broadway, East Missoula, and Shawron Marshall, based on the unique characteristics of each segment. We started working on this plan over a year ago, and so we're getting close to the end of it. The plan was conceived out of a need to address safety issues. So we started the process by establishing an understanding of the issues within the corridor. Looking back on our process, the first open house was in February, where we asked the public to tell us about the corridor and their concerns. We then took comments, and along with our research of the corridor, came up with 3 corridor-wide alternatives and detailed options for 4 focus areas that were identified as specific areas of concern. During the second open house, we presented these options and asked for comments. We also posted surveys on the project website to create a better understanding of preferences for the design options. So we had over 1,200 social pinpoint visits. Social pinpoint is the platform we used for our public involvement. over 275 unique users and 196 survey responses and comments. So I'm going to go through and do a quick review of the responses we received so you can better understand how we developed the preferred alternative. So we had 3 corridor-wide alternatives. There was a complete streets, shared use path, and then sidewalks and parking. And the shared use path was the most popular. And so here's a little recap of what the shared use path included. Basically, it was a shared use path from Van Buren to Easy Street, and then a shared use path along the base of Mount Jumbo connecting downtown to East Missoula. People liked this because of the safety aspect and having a shared use path that's separated from vehicles. They liked having a continuous path the entire length of the corridor. But they also thought that the shared use path would be a good improvement for both of the other 2 alternatives. The concern with this one is that there isn't necessarily a bicycle and pedestrian connection from Easy Street to Heighton Street. And so making sure there's still a way to connect East Broadway to East Missoula. And then looking at the focus areas, so the first one was at Van Buren, so basically that west end of the corridor. Looking at preferences for bicycle amenities and pedestrian amenities, there was a strong preference for a shared use path for bikes, also for pedestrians, but there was also some desire to have a boulevard sidewalk as well in that area. The next focus area was at the railroad and the I-90 interchange area. We presented 3 options here. The first was 2 roundabouts, so one at each of the eastbound and westbound I-90 interchanges, along with an improved railroad underpass. The second was the Mount Jumbo shared use path, and I am including that one on your screen so that you can kind of see what it is. Basically, from East Missoula running along the entire base of Mount Jumbo, and then along Van Buren to connect downtown. And then the third option was 1 roundabout, which would have been at the eastbound interchange. So this one was a little interesting in that how we packaged these affected how people responded. So we had, because of the roundabout or the railroad underpass, if we would have included that with the other 2 options, I think they would have been more popular. But basically people really want to see that railroad underpass widened. There's a lot of positive feedback for that option. Although people did like the Mount Jumbo shared use path option because they felt it was the safest and bicyclists have to ride through a roundabout. Let's see. And then I think as far as the roundabouts, there was just kind of some discussion about which one's really necessary. And then there were some that just prefer no roundabouts. And then through the East Missoula area, there was a preference for a shared use path, although there's about equal for pedestrians between a boulevard sidewalk and a shared use path, and then a strong preference for parallel parking. And then we got several comments with differing opinions on the value and safety of a raised cycle track. So there was just some kind of, I think, indecision maybe about really if that's the right option or not. Then we also talked about, or got comments about which side, like a sidewalk should be on, which side the shared use path should be on. And then also some concerns about a shared use path getting congested. So there could be conflicts with dogs and strollers and bikes. So that was a concern. And then the last focus area was at Sharon. We had 2 options here. One was an on-street protected parking lane that leads to the west of Sharon. And then I'm showing option 2, which is a parking lot to the east. Basically, there's a lot of on-street or a lot of parking right now along the street that's creating safety issues as tubers are trying to access the river. So option 2 was a little popular. The reasons for that were it provides more parking spots, and gets the cars off the highway, which people seem to like. There were concerns that people will not walk, don't want to park here and then walk back to Shawron to access the river. There's currently another property owner between, this is a kind of a wide spot in the right of way here, but there's a property owner between the parking and the river. And so without an agreement, they can't just access straight from the parking lot. So they have to walk back. So there is that concern. Other thing, and a couple other concerns, you know, people made the comment, like, can you provide enough parking? Like, there's just so much use at this area. I think people want to see as much parking as possible to make this a safer area. And then we also had a option for a bus and shuttle pull out for people so people wouldn't have to drive out here. And that was also really popular. So with those comments, we met with our advisory committee. We had a couple meetings with them to determine the preferred alternative. So the process began by evaluating and ranking the alternatives based on their ability to achieve the project goals, which include improving safety, improving operation, and addressing access management, expanding multimodal facilities, enhancing the unique character of each segment, being cost-effective, feasible, and maintainable, and protecting the environment from negative impacts. And then public support was also taken into consideration. So this is the preferred alternative we came up with. I'm going to go into this in more detail for each segment, so don't feel like you have to absorb all of this right away. But basically, we decided that a mix of the alternatives was needed to respond to the unique character of each segment of the corridor. So no one alternative was the right solution. The committee agreed right away that the bike ped facilities should be included for the entire length of the corridor, with a mix of shared use paths, on-street bike lanes, raised cycle tracks, and sidewalks. One of the first and easiest decisions was to include a shared use path from Staple Street to Tamarack. And then there was more discussion on the other segments, so I'll go into more detail on those areas, but looking at the overall preferred alternative, it includes a shared use path and on-street bike lanes from Van Buren to East Missoula with the new wider railroad bridge and eastbound I-90 interchange roundabout. Through East Missoula, there are cycle tracks, sidewalks, and landscape boulevards. And new parking areas proposed just east of Shawron, along with the shared use path connecting East Missoula to Tamarack. We also considered bus stops and crossings, as well as lighting through the corridor. The bus stops are shown on the map as small orange circles. Through East Missoula, the bus stops have shifted off Speedway onto Highway 200. So I'm going to zoom into the East Broadway segment now. So for this area, there's a shared use path and on-street bike lanes provided from Van Buren to I-90. The shared use path provides a two-way connection for users that only want to access locations on the south side of Highway 200. The advisory committee felt it was necessary to accommodate how people use the corridor, often beginning and ending their trip on the south side of the highway. This includes students living in apartments along the river and going to classes at the university. On-street bike lanes cater to commuter bicyclists from East Missoula traveling into downtown for work. On-street parking is provided where existing right-of-way width allows, providing overflow parking for apartment complexes and events. That area is shown with a yellow highlight, and then we'll need to take a closer look at this with the final design to determine exactly where parking is needed. The committee chose to prioritize the eastbound on-street bike lane over on-street parking. Street crossings and bus stops are improved and will include lighting. You're not proposing continuous street lighting through the East Broadway segment, but instead focusing lighting for improved safety. Access management near Van Buren is addressed by extending the median to the east and eliminating the left turn lane at Van Buren for vehicles traveling west. This allows for better access control while creating space for improved bicycle and pedestrian amenities. And as properties redevelop, we'll look for opportunities for easements to better accommodate bike ped and boulevard facilities. And this is primarily at the Thunderbird. There's a pinch point there. And so we know that there's some areas that we just need to be aware of acquiring additional right-of-way or easements as those opportunities arise. We also discussed the potential for a river path and see the potential for both a river path and a shared use path along Highway 200 to be realized. If one of those moves forward, the other should be reevaluated while also taking into consideration the user groups for each path. And then also within this segment, the railroad bridge will be replaced with a wider bridge, and a roundabout will be added at the eastbound I-90 interchange. So the railroad bridge is replaced to accommodate on-street bike lanes and a shared use path. While this is a large expense, it provides the best solution for connectivity and safety. Providing bike and pedestrian connectivity along Highway 200 was a priority based on the comments. People didn't want to see all of these improvements go in and still have a barrier between East Missoula and Missoula. So the roundabout at the eastbound I-90 interchange improves safety and intersection operations while addressing the challenging geometry of the intersection. And a roundabout at the westbound I-90 interchange is not included in the preferred alternative. However, if there is a need for a roundabout in the future, it can be accommodated. For East Missoula, the improvements include sidewalks, landscaped boulevards, raised cycle tracks, and curb and gutter on both sides of Highway 200. Continuous street lighting is provided from Heighton Street to Staple Street. Bus stop and striped crossings. Crossing improvements are planned for Heighton Street, Randall Street, Summers Street, and Staple Street. With the street improvements, the entire 80-foot right-of-way will be utilized. This will affect parking for some businesses that currently use the right-of-way for parking. In these areas, on-street parking can be accommodated by eliminating the landscaped boulevards. Parallel parking was chosen because it leaves more space for multimodal facilities. Cycle tracks were chosen because a separated bike facility was preferred for protection. We also discussed a shared use path, but it was desirable to have equivalent improvement both sides of the road, especially when considering future redevelopment along Highway 200. There was also considerable discussion on the transitions from cycle tracks to shared use paths. We looked at how that would happen in more detail and were advised to incorporate transit stops into those transitions and crossings. So looking at the Heighton Street crossing in more detail, this is where the first transition from a shared use path to a cycle track happens. The two-way shared use path will transition to a one-way raised cycle track on the north and south of Highway 200 through East Missoula. This transition includes a bicycle and pedestrian crossing at Heighton Street with a refuge island to allow pedestrians to stop before finishing crossing the street. Bus stops are located at this intersection so users have access to the street crossings. And then this is just a rendering of the improvements for East Missoula. And I think this is a really good view of kind of reminding people that what the actual right-of-way width. And so right now the road is pretty narrow. You have this huge shoulder, and with these improvements that they will go basically to this fence line. Sorry, I'm pointing the wrong screen here. But this construction fence line is pretty much to the edge of the right-of-way here. And you can see on the other side, there's currently parking often in the right-of-way. And so that'll be affected by these improvements. And so we just want to make sure we provide options if businesses are using the right-of-way for parking, that we have an option to include on-street parking. So East Missoula lacks curb, gutter, and sidewalks, as well as having numerous approaches and large areas of continuously paved property abutting the road that results in a nearly continual access with few restrictions in place. This causes safety and stormwater issues. To address these issues, curb and gutter will be installed along the entire length of Highway 200 through East Missoula. This will address stormwater and drainage issues and delineate access to businesses and residences, as well as street connections. Intersecting streets will be better aligned for more perpendicular street intersections. And then we've also included a two-way left turn lane. This removes stopped or slow left turning vehicles from the through lanes and stores those in the median area until an acceptable gap is in opposing traffic is available. And we've also included additional driveway access for existing businesses and residences. And then the other transition area is at Staple Street. So we have the raised cycle tracks transitioning to a shared use path on the north side of the highway, again with the refuge island and bus stops at this intersection. So for the Shawron Marshall segment, a shared use path is located on the north side of the highway, connecting to the existing path at Tamarack. The path is located on the north side of the highway to provide better access to existing residences and to address construction feasibility issues where there is limited space between the river and hillside. A rectangular rapid flashing beacon is provided near Tamarack for users to cross Highway 200 and connect to the existing trail east of Tamarack. And a new parking lot is provided east of the Shell Run fishing access with a trail connecting parking to the river access. A pullout is also provided at Shell Run that can accommodate shuttle service. So taking a closer look at that. This shows the bus pullout, which would serve Mountain Line as well as provide shuttle service for tubers accessing the river. An air compressor could be provided at the bus pullout for inflating tubes. And a trail will connect to a new parking lot located east of Shell Run. So basically the south side, we can do it wouldn't be as wide as the shared use path on the north side, but there's space that we could do a narrower trail on the south side to allow people to safely connect from the parking to the Shell Run fishing access. And then taking a closer look at the Tamarack crossing, looking at that transition from the north side to the south side to connect to that existing trail. So we'd be providing a striped crossing with a rectangular rapid flashing beacon to alert drivers to users crossing the highway, and also have coordinated this crossing with bus stop locations. And then just a couple other items that we discussed with the advisory committee. Maintenance was a big thing through East Missoula, and then also the need to work with MDT to get approval for these improvements. So we'll include some strategies for addressing maintenance in the final plan document. And then as these improvements are implemented, maintenance will need to be addressed. So wrapping up, so we've just finished getting all the public comments in for the preferred alternative. And now we're gonna be evaluating funding strategies and project phasing and implementation. And then that'll all go into the final plan document, which will be released for public comment. Planning for that to be the beginning of January. And then we'll have another comment period before it goes through the plan approval process. And then at that point, we'll be looking for funding, and then it goes through the whole engineering design process and into construction. So I think we're excited to be kind of wrapping up this part of the project, and I'm happy to take any questions you have on it.
Thanks, Kate. A lot of good stuff there. Questions, comments?
Kate, I had a question for you on the East Broadway section. If there's a shared use path, do we also need to have a bike lane?
Yeah. So I think the advisory committee spent some time really considering this and what was appropriate here. And I think the key thing to think about is that this is a unique area and that most of the land uses that are generating activity are on the south side through this area. And so there is a real need for people to have a bike and pedestrian facility that can just connect them on the south side. So we don't want people, say they're living in the multifamily and go to school at the university, we don't want them to have to cross the street to get onto the bike lane on the north side and then cross again to go back to the university. And if you spend any time out there, you'll see a lot of people that already just use the sidewalk as a shared use path because of that. And so we felt there was definitely that need. But then we also talked about the people that are biking in, the commuter cyclists. So those maybe coming from East Missoula and thinking about what makes sense for them. We originally were going to have that east or westbound bike lane, and then because we felt like that made sense for people who were coming from East Missoula into downtown, we didn't want them to have to be crossing to get over to the shared use path on the south side. And then the eastbound bike lane was added in basically to really accommodate that commuter cyclist. So I think this is a unique situation where while we don't typically want to have multiple facilities for bikes, I think it makes sense in this area.
Don, did you have your hand up?
I did. Some similar, I had the exact same question as Josh, but another one as well. The other one was, it seemed like the thing that people were voting on about this shared use path was the idea of the shared use path at the base of Mount Jumbo. Is that right?
I think there was yes and no. I think that they were in some areas we were just asking, do you want a shared use path versus an on-street bike lane versus a cycle track? So in that instance, it was just pretty clear cut. In some cases, they were looking at it was along the base of Mount Jumbo, but we also got a lot of comments that they just generally wanted a shared use path and really like to have that separation. And then in combination with the comments that they wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for bikes and pedestrians to get from Easy Street to Hayden Street. So this connection through here, they didn't want to cut off everybody that lives along East Broadway here and stop them from getting from East Missoula. And so we just felt like this solution with the railroad underpass made the most sense.
So the other question I had, or a couple other questions, thoughts, I guess. One of them is around bus stops. And it seems like there's maybe over further to the east on the plan, there's a couple places where bus stops are in the, the separated cycle track kind of zigs behind the bus stop. Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering how some of these intersections or things are working other places in the city, whether there have been conflicts. I think Russell Street has some similar kinds of things happening, and I have not really tracked. I haven't heard it from the bus drivers that there's any problem, but I wonder if you guys are at the city hearing of conflicts with this kind of transition where there's pedestrians accessing the bus shelter who are having a cross motion with the cyclists.
Aaron, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I haven't heard any complaints about that. And when we, I guess I think of this as, which conflict are you going to create safety around? And other options that you have are putting basically putting the cycle track out into the street, which creates a bike vehicle conflict. And we know that when that happens, that we get complaints and that it's a much less safe. It's just operating at higher speeds, vehicle anticipating and a cyclist anticipating vehicles as they wrap around a bus on the outside. And so this, makes just a safer way to interact. And I think we also just don't typically see the volumes of people going across to the bus stop and cyclists to really create much of a hazard there. There's actually some really interesting video out of San Francisco that shows a transit stop with a protected bike lane that goes through, sort of similar to this, but the volumes of people coming on and off. I think it might be a streetcar stop and cyclists going through. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of volume. And there's essentially people slow down, people look, and everyone's operating, and you're able to communicate in a way that avoids, most, if not all, of the conflict there. So, but I think it's a good point that we'll be able to continue to monitor how these facilities work because we've designed them and constructed them on Russell Street. So we should hopefully within a year or two, we'll know much better how they operate.
I guess this was, in the sort of comment realm, it feels like we have a little bit of everything on the bike facility, shared use path on the road travel for commuters, separated cyclotrack, and there are a lot of transitions between them. And I guess I wonder whether that's the right solution or whether it could get simplified, streamlined a little bit, have less transitions. But I get in each case why what was selected. It's a lot of different things. And then my final comment was around the the Sharon area, that it feels worrisome to me to create this remote parking lot that is close to the river, but there's a private owner between. And I guess I just wonder, when I think about other situations that I've been in that are sort of like this, if you go to the ocean anywhere, there's tons of people parking along whatever street there is that allows you to get access to the beach. And at some level, I just wonder if that isn't the model. And I know it's higher speed traffic, but shouldn't we just pull off the side of the road and have a sidewalk, right along the curb? Just a wider pull off all the way along there for some distance. It feels more direct to me than this thing that I think is going to end up causing a bunch of problems, and probably people aren't really going to park there anyway because it's a little too far.
Well, I guess we'll see. I don't know. Josh has been pretty intimately involved in this, and believe me, as you probably can imagine, this has been an issue that's caused our phones to ring off the hook incessantly during the tuber hatch period of the year. And I think what's proposed here is a possible solution. Basically the problem is, as it is right now, you've got folks opening up their doors, carting their crap out into the street right there along Highway 200. If there was a way in which there was enough right-of-way available to push those vehicles back farther up against the sidewalk, maybe. Josh, do you have any thoughts?
So I'd say I hadn't really thought about the solution that Don is talking about. I did, as Dave said, put a bunch of time into this independent of this East Missoula corridor effort. I worked on this with Shane and Jacqueline and Randy Arnold and Chet, just because this is such an acute issue with people parking illegally in what's a really dangerous area where they're just barely off the road. Cars are going by at 55. And as Dave said, they're stepping out between parked cars into traffic with inner tubes and a beer. It's just super dangerous. So we looked into this because it was potentially available with the big potential on it. And one of the things we did was just to walk it. And it really didn't take very long to walk from Sharon to this parking lot, or this potential parking lot. And if there was a path between them, our thought was it did seem like a doable thing. The other piece that would go with this would be a big fence so that people wouldn't trespass from the parking lot to the river. We're a little bit hung up right now because it turns out that this land, though it's in the right of way, is actually owned by Northwestern Energy and leased to MDT. And as far as I know, MDT wanted to make sure that the nearby landowners were okay with this, but I haven't heard back in a while and need to check in with Jacqueline. So maybe she could speak to this as to where this project is. And then it was yet to be determined as who would own it in the interim or manage it, because FWP would have years to wait before they could have the money to take this on. So we're kind of bumbling along here, but I've been pushing really hard because the need is so acute. And I have to say, truthfully, hadn't thought about the solution that you mentioned, which sounds like a wider road with a sidewalk.
Exactly. More, maybe a little wider than a parallel park thing, but not a separate lane the way WGM had proposed earlier.
So if we were to, and I realize we're drifting far from the East Missoula plan, but while we're here talking about this, I guess the question is, the right of way big enough to do that? Would we have to purchase right of way from a whole bunch of landowners to take that on? And maybe some of the planners on the call can answer that question.
Kate, do you have any insight there?
Yeah, I think that, we looked at something similar to what you're looking at. So I think there's probably some space. There's some grading that needs to happen so that we don't affect the other adjacent properties. The other thing to consider, I think it's possible, I can't say for sure. I think the other thing to consider is adjacent property owners, and they really don't like having all the parking in front of their houses, because what happens is people go and they float down and then they come back at 2 in the morning and are slamming car doors and whatnot. And so I think that's, if we could, I think the ideal solution is getting that east parking lot and figuring out how you could get access directly to the river from that new parking lot. That would probably make the neighbors the happiest, and I think it's probably the safest solution. But I do hear what you're saying, Don, as far as will people actually walk back?
And my other question is, how do we stop them from parking along the edge of the road anyway?
So
Well,
we were hoping we had a plan on that one, and the idea is we could, if we could get this created, we would do a parking resolution to make it so you can't park on the road, and we'll tow your car away. And there's definitely a little bit of muddy water here in terms of clarity about how we can do that on a state road. But I felt like there was a path through if we could reach agreement, and we were willing to push on that. So the idea was we were pretty parking lot, create a path and a parking resolution and a fence.
And we were pretty effective this summer over on Tamarack and Juniper in limiting parking in some very undesirable portions of that roadway for parking, and pushing folks down to the confluence unit of the Milltown State Park. So
yeah, Dave, I want to echo that. I mean, we took on the same type of issue, this acute recreation parking issue, with the same set of partners I listed off before, and attempted to educate and then enforce and push people to park in one area and not in another. And it was really successful. So that gave heart to this effort. Like, oh, we can do this. There was still some illegal parking there for sure. That illegal parking was on Highway 200, and we did not put a resolution in place because of the muddy water around who enforces. Can a county enforce parking on a state road? And supposedly over the winter, our astute attorneys are going to take this on.
Yeah, the other piece that, and maybe Kate will talk about this a little, is that there wasn't a whole. The comment we received back was not generally supportive of the parallel parking along the side of the highway. So there's that. There's also the cost of building curb, gutter, sidewalk for that whole length is going to be definitely more expensive than the other design option. And then I think the third piece is thinking about how vehicles are exiting that, or once you're in the parallel parking, that's one thing, but then when you're getting out of that, are people doing a U-turn or dangerous movements? Is there the right visibility to be able to do that? Or where do they turn around? The parking lot sort of addresses some of those issues. And then, there's the added safety concern of having people getting out of their cars. You don't often see parallel parking on a 45 or 55 mile an hour highway. And I think there are some good reasons you don't. And if you are to widen the highway, create that space, you're not going to have the friction that you do today. That's really, I think during the tuber hatch, people know to drive slow through here because it feels really uncomfortable to drive at 45 or 55. So we're getting, I think we're mitigating the risk right now with some kind of, people know that conflict exists. And if you were to create sort of the full width for parallel parking and you had a clear travel lane and it felt more open, people would be less likely to drive slow through there. So I don't know that you're necessarily addressing all of the safety issues in the same way that you do if you can just get the vehicles off the highway and not having people cross the road, keeping them all on one side, and really focusing your activity in places where it's safe to do that.
Although I think we want to probably avoid the friction that involves the bumpers of vehicles and human flesh along there. So,
yeah, no, I'm not saying that that's a good solution today, but I think there is it has a somewhat of a dangerous traffic calming effect, if you will.
Yeah, going out there during the tuber hatch to take a look is really frightening. It just looks like it's only a matter of time before some person's going to step out between two cars with a tube obscuring their vision and a beer in the other hand and meet an oncoming bumper.
I agree with everything people said about the safety. And I do think that what Kate said is right, that if the best solution is probably connecting that parking lot to the river. And if we could do that, that feels like a pretty good
Yeah.
whole solution that really would work.
I'm totally with you on that, Don. That would be my first choice. And when we did a little bit of surveying, and I was just going to ask Jacqueline if she had anything to add to this, what originally we thought was just a wide right of way looked like a chunk of Northwestern Energy land that MDT has an easement on that basically touched the river at one point. And if that was indeed the case, and apparently MDT wanted to kind of get the thumbs up from nearby landowners, then we could create a whole new thing over here. And maybe, I mean, this is a huge maybe just decommission Sharon and as it is now and move the whole thing over. That's with FWP's cooperation and all kinds of money we don't have yet. Admittedly, I'm dreaming out loud here, but that's the potential is there. And I haven't checked in on this in a while, and I'd love to hear from Jacqueline if what MDT is thinking about in terms of the mandatory approval of nearby neighbors, which is the last I'd heard.
So we do have another agenda item we're gonna have to get to here in a second, but Jacqueline, are you still on the line?
I think she had to
She
leave.
is not.
Bob, is there anything that you want to add?
I would like to add that I have entrusted this further research to Jacqueline and Commissioner Slotnick. Kind of like you, I have not touched base with her on it for a while yet. So I think that's something we need to add to a future agenda.
Great. Well, and I appreciate the reminder, and I'll push back on this one more time. Check in again.
And I think we can check in too, and that might be something that can be added to the final report for this plan.
Great.
Some of those challenges or opportunities or sort of further work that we might need to do.
Thanks, Aaron. I would love that. I would love the help with that.
Yeah. So keep me in the loop, and I'll check it as well and see if there are any updates.
So Aaron or Kate, before we move on, one kind of broad, higher level question relates to public comment and how that factored into the preferred alternative, because the numbers that were shown here were not huge numbers of comments on the plan or aspects of the plan. When you have like the difference between 22 and 15, well, is that really all that informative for the direction we ought to take? Maybe all things being equal, but some of what we're talking about here, whether it's maybe some of the comments that Don made relative to shared use paths and transitions and whatnot, or the parking area at Sharon. Anything that you want to share in terms of how the public comment factored into the direction taken? Because I guess I would just not want, I think that's a consideration, but given the fairly low numbers of respondents, I don't know that should be a driving factor. Aaron, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we did our best to take into consideration comments that we got, and I think we used the surveys to give us, I think they gave us a good indication of the type of facilities people liked. And then we tried to use those as much as possible, but we really used that in combination with the goals that we had set forth early in the process. We came up with these goals that we wanted to meet, and that was our priority, was to meet those goals, looking at improved safety and making sure operations were improved, those types of things. And so it was just kind of a combination of that. And as far as, yes, we're changing, there's a lot of transitions, but I also think you look at these three segments and they are very different segments. I mean, the land uses are very different. And so I don't know that it makes sense to have the same facility through that whole area. I mean, it's a long corridor. So, while we focused on those transitions, I think that when you go out there and actually, if you see this built, you wouldn't feel like you're going through a transition every few seconds. I think you have to consider that those are spread out a little bit more than maybe how it looks when I present it. Aaron, you want to add to that?
No, I think that definitely covers it. The only piece I might add is, especially on that East Broadway section with the shared use path and the bike lanes, there's we had a lot of conversations about whether that shared use path is on the street or on the riverfront, because we've sort of looked at both of those, or definitely the riverfront has been in the plans and a desired option for quite some time. And so I could see this, when we actually get to implementing this project, that there may be that, it could be that the shared use path is along the river because it isn't that far, but then you still have the sidewalk and the bike lanes for direct travel. For the people who really are comfortable with that and don't really care, they can go through. So I think this design accommodates the land use and the actual behavioral patterns that we see from people out there and what they're desiring to do, but also gives us some flexibility to sort of respond to those kinds of changing dynamics. And so it feels like a good option that will allow us to get the right facility at the right time, but responds to what people were saying, whether they want a protected bike lane or a shared use path. I think people were responding that they want separation, that on-street bike lane doesn't really serve the purpose that most people want it to, beyond the 6% of cyclists that are out there today biking on it. We're not going to get much further unless we do something that's more comfortable. So.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Kate. We probably better move on to our final item here, but thanks everyone for your great comments and input. Thanks, Kate, for your work. We look forward to seeing this plan move forward.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, our final item today is a presentation on the 2020 Pavement Condition Assessment Survey and Report. Mr. Gray or Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, Dave had some connectivity issues. I think he's got some people working on his house, so I'm just going to take this one solo today. But it's a pretty quick update. This is a project that's been in the works. Gosh, it feels like for over a year now. It took a while to get through, but we're more or less wrapping up this project and moving ahead at the city and the county level on what this intends. So this is really just kind of a wrap up for this project for the MPO. So I'll go over sort of what we did, what came out of it, and how it's going to be used in the future. So let's see. So the purpose of this study, just kind of as a reminder to take us back, it's been a while since we talked about it. There's a couple of overlapping purposes, and this is a good example of a partnership and an area where the MPO can help the city and the county with their activities while we're moving ahead with the work that we do. So at the MPO level, we really needed a good measure of pavement condition and our pavement performance measures. And we haven't had a very great data source to rely on outside of what MDT collects for their routes. Locally, it's been really hit or miss and not consistently collected. And so this gave us a data source that we could be confident in. It's comparable to what MDT collects for their facilities. So we've got a good comparable data set. And it allows us to really align our data with other assessments and other asset management like water and sidewalk and utility improvements. And so it's giving us the comprehensive data set that we need to really look at all of those things in combination. For the city and the county, this gave us really good detail on looking at our maintenance needs, our budgets, and projecting out a few years to get a sense of what those costs are, what our current budgets are going to get us, and where there's a deficit and what that might mean for the future. So we have a couple of levels that we got this data at. There's within the city limits. That's one geography that's being used by the city. We also have the MPO urbanized area, and then the county chipped in a little bit of extra money to be able to get the rest of the streets outside of the MPO area in the county. And so we were able to get this data for the entire county. And just to give a sense of the scope of the data, we were collecting condition data up as far as Seeley Lake, out as far as Frenchtown and the west end of the county and down through Lolo, and within the MPO area. And we collected that data for really every segment of roadway that wasn't MDT owned and that was paved. We didn't collect unpaved roads because there's not much point getting pavement condition for a gravel road. So I'll skip over some of these maps. One of the nice things about this data is that we were able to get it into our GIS system. And it also came with street level photography. So we have a number of different data sets that went into the pavement condition. It was, I believe, cracking, rutting, and I can never remember what the other measure is. But essentially, there are several measures that go into a complete, what we call a pavement condition index. That's an overall condition. It's broken down by block, so we can really get into some detail on what that condition is. We can also then look at, say, here's an example of that map. We can see what the PCI condition of that segment is. This is a 5th Street between Grant and Johnson, I believe. And then we can actually go in and look at the street level photography to see what that condition actually looks like. So it's a way to help kind of verify that the data is actually true to life out there on the street. So it's a really useful tool, not just for pavement management, but now we have this data set. We can really look, every one of these dots on this map is a street level photograph. So they were basically doing what Google does as they went along scanning the road. They were also taking photos. So it's a really good data set that we can use for managing our pavement condition system. So there's also some other added benefits of doing these inventories. It costs additional money to do it, and we didn't have the funding available at the time, but we can go back. The data has been collected, so we can get these inventories. So they collected LiDAR data as they went along, and so we can use that to get traffic sign inventories. We can look at street paint conditions, storm drains, manhole covers, curb, gutter, sidewalk, ADA. So all of those things can be extracted from this data set. All of those cost money, but it's a good way to think about all of these different inventories and how much detail do we need and where do we have gaps. We can also use these to help with other problem identification. So thinking about site obstructions at intersections, if there are zoning complaints and we need to go in and look at that street view, we've got that updated photography. And then, as we mentioned, the pavement condition is ultimately the goal of this project, or was the goal. So part of the benefit of this, particularly for the city and the county, is doing better with pavement asset management. And so it's using this PCI index, this standardized data collection methodology, to develop some modeling and do more of a data-driven approach to our pavement maintenance. And I believe the commissioners have had a presentation on this from the county side and what this means for county budgets. But just we can look system-wide at what our PCI ranges are. So we can look at these by different types of roads, like collectors versus local streets. We can get a sense of where we are today. But then we can also use modeling software, like something called MicroPaver is one tool, and it was what was used for this project. And that takes all of that PCI index. It looks at the cost, unit costs for different types of maintenance activities. And it looks at deterioration rates for pavement and how quickly is our roadway condition deteriorating over time, and what happens if you don't maintain a particular section versus doing a different kind of treatment and what that costs. And so you can input all these different elements like the road classification, that deterioration model, our PCI index, the maintenance costs, and our ongoing budgets. And then it comes up with estimated costs for what it would take to maintain all of those roads. And it does it in a couple of different ways. One is just what's the overall cost? If we wanted to bring every street up to a good PCI condition, what does that cost throughout the whole, whatever geography you're looking at, whether it's city, MPO, or county roads. So it gives us essentially what's our deferred maintenance today in terms of bringing our condition up to a good standard. And it shows that there's different costs for when roads start to degrade far enough, then you go from sort of a standard chip seal kind of maintenance that's fairly cost effective, and it might drop it down to a more expensive maintenance activity. And so the longer you let roads go, the more expensive it is to bring them into good condition. And so the software is able to look at sort of what's the most efficient way to maintain our roads in terms of balancing that, keeping some roads in good condition and bringing others up to that higher PCI level. And it can also look at our what will happen under our current budget conditions. So just as an example, looking at arterials and collectors within the urbanized area. And again, this is arterials and collectors that are not part of MDT's maintenance system. And you can see where we're at today in terms of PCI, and then it projects out in 5 years under our current budget. You can see what your trend is as far as pavement condition. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about how to interpret some of this. It's a model and it's taking inputs, and the outputs you get are really only as good as what you're putting into the model. And this is sort of the first time we've done this, and so there's some caveats to some of these projections. But we can also compare different budget scenarios. So what would it take to maintain our existing condition, or what would it take to maintain, say, a target PCI of 71, or our current budget, and then what would happen if we just stopped maintaining our roads after 5 years. And so you can sort of see the difference in what it would cost to maintain our current street condition might be an increase in a couple $1 million a year in maintenance activities. So it's giving us a sense of what is it going to take to achieve some different targets, which is not something that we've necessarily had in our toolbox before. So a couple of takeaways beyond that. I attached one of the reports to the agenda. So if you're interested in diving into what those look like in terms of how the budgets are integrated, all of the data that goes into this analysis. But a couple of key takeaways are, one, that our current budgets aren't keeping up with our pavement maintenance demands. That under our current budget, the projection is that our road condition is going to get worse over time. But we also think that based on this, what we've done over the last year and reviewing all of this, that we probably need more data to get better, more accurate projections for what those budget scenarios will do to our pavement condition. So one of the key inputs that we need to work on is that roadway deterioration model. So what is the rate that our roads are deteriorating? And the data we have is sort of a snapshot in time. But when we do this again in 4 or 5 years, we will be able to compare those two data sets, look at what treatments we did over that time, see how much our condition changed, and really start to dial in that deterioration model that plays a big impact on what our budgets are going to help us achieve. So this is just the first baseline in that process. It's giving us a lot of really great data, but we need to keep doing this over the next, until we're no longer deciding to maintain our roads. That we need that data over time to help us fine tune those projections. And the other piece that we've realized is that the way these reports came in and what micropaver appears to be doing is it doesn't necessarily tell us exactly these are the projects you need to do and this is the benefit. It gives us a sense of where our priorities should be in terms of, if we maintain certain roads, we can keep them from deteriorating and saving that sort of reclamation cost or having to reconstruct a roadway instead of just doing a maintenance activity. But we're overlaying this with things like utility projects. So water projects or sewer projects that are going in and tearing up roadways. We can do a better job of prioritizing the timing of some of those other projects. Like a leaky pipe fixed in one location is just as good as a leaky pipe in another in a lot of instances. And so we can prioritize our utility maintenance projects to coincide with our pavement and get some added cost effectiveness there. So, and it's helping us sort of direct where our maintenance dollars are being invested. So there's a lot of useful information, but bottom line, we have these general budget and PCI projections. We're just not sure exactly how accurate those are at this point, because we don't have 5 or 10 years worth of data to be able to feed into the model. So with that's kind of where we're at. We have these reports. I think we're in a good place to use that to help us prioritize our pavement activities. It gives us the data we need for our long range plan to sort of report on these performance metrics over time. And we'll plan to continue collecting and evaluating this data over the coming years so that we can improve the quality of our projections. And we'll work with the city and the county. There's a lot more benefit there in terms of just looking at those budgets and those work plans that come out of the software to help us fine tune our maintenance activities. So that's all I have to say on that. I think we're more or less done with that project, and we got what we needed out of it. And so we'll be using that data quite a bit, I think, over the next couple of years. Any questions or thoughts?
Oh, okay, great. Questions, comments? Don, it looks like I knew it. Okay, go for it, Don.
Well, I just was sort of, a lot of these modeling things have a tendency to make the sky seem like it's falling. And I guess, after living here for 27 years, driving the roads, I don't feel like we are on the trajectory that shows. And, I guess the mayor probably is more in tune with the general level of complaining within the city about the road conditions. But it feels to me more like we are on if anything, staying level or maybe a very slow loss of quality in roads, but not as aggressive as that model shows. And I guess my question was just wondering if there is any way to do more than my anecdotal going backwards. I mean, we know what we've spent over the last 25 years. And I guess I'm wondering if there's any way to sort of tune our model up by some level of forensic information that might be available about the quality of streets that we've actually tracked over time.
Aaron?
I don't know that, we did a little bit of that. We looked back at, what maintenance activities we had done over the last couple of years, just to help feed that into the model and get cost estimates. But the data set that would be missing in that is what was the road condition before those treatments, or, it's hard to go back 5 years and say this is what the street condition was to figure out how fast our roads are deteriorating. Because I think that's one of the key inputs on those models that shows that how quickly the condition index is deteriorating over time. And Bob, you look like you probably have a lot more to say about this from since MDT's been doing this for a lot longer, but I think you're on mute, Bob.
Bob, you're still muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Now.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
There you go.
I got a fancy new headset, and I'm supposed to just be able to raise and lower this mic, and it's supposed to do its thing. I guess it doesn't work well with Zoom. It does great with Teams, though. So anyhow, what I wanted to share was, I don't know if everybody's aware, but I've worked in highways in some fashion since the early 90s, but in Billings, Great Falls, the Havre-Shelby area, and then now Missoula and Kalispell. And one thing to note is that models are a great tool, but environment has a huge difference in how pavement behaves. And in Western Montana, we see a little different behavior of the model. There seems to be more of a breakover point, if you will, than pavement deterioration is definitely not linear. It does not just continue to go down. There's a point where you go off the cliff, and figuring out what that looks like and how to input that into the model is very challenging. To be completely honest, we've missed a couple times at MDT here in Western Montana where we've programmed pavement preservation projects as simple as maybe an overlay or sometimes even a chip seal. And we're programming 1 to 3 years in advance. And we've had several occasions where what today looks like, if we can get this chipped in the next 2 years, when we got there 2 years later, we needed a mill fill because we missed that projection that drastically. So I guess I would be, when I looked at the model, it caused me a little bit of concern, wondering whether or not a standardized model properly has that breakover point noted. So Don, to your point, where right now the roads seem like they're in good shape, my caution is to make sure that we're looking at it properly, and traffic volumes are going up and getting the growth in traffic volumes. The other thing is that size of vehicle and weight of vehicle plays a huge role in that as well. You know, I mean, a Prius versus a semi it's not even double. It's like they're non-lineal. So I guess that's just what I wanted to share to your comment, Don, was like the roads feel really good right now, but I think that the city, what we're doing here with this modeling is a great tool. It's something that we've been using for about 15 years with the highway department, and we're still working to refine it. So it gets better every year we do it. But I will tell you that when I look at our models and stuff, every year we go through this, you know, Donnie and I sat down a couple of years ago and looked at it and evaluated all of our different roads that had concerns. And when I sat down and looked at it with Jacqueline this year, it was like, holy shit, did things go to hell in a handbasket in a hurry when we start looking at it. And so it can sneak up on you. And as a construction guy, there was the number of times I was out there and when I would ask, why are we just chip sealing this? This thing needs, we got, you know, inch deep ruts out here and we're just going to throw a chip seal on it. So there's an art that the engineering can be as good as it can be, but there's an art to getting the right numbers or the right model in place. And, you know, at least in Missoula, your climate isn't drastically different from one edge of the city to the other like it is in the Missoula district, let me tell you. But I think it's going to be a great tool, and we'll be working to refine it for years to come. But it's going to be just a super valuable tool. I'm excited to see how the work that's been done, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. And part of the refining, I think, will also be the cost estimates, because we found on our side with Shane Stack looking at some of the numbers that while the data is going to be a great baseline for us in terms of pavement condition, just what we have planned for some of the treatments of the pavement and cost estimates that we've run varied quite a bit from what the consultant provided us. Well, it looks like we're losing folks. The mayor of Missoula had enough and gave us the finger there, I saw. So I guess we're out of time. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with it. Good information today. Aaron, do we have a meeting in December?
I suspect so. We have one on the calendar, and so
okay.
We'll see. I think it's going to depend on what we have with the long range transportation plan, but I think we'll be figuring that out in the next couple of weeks as we look at what our work plan is. So,
all right, very good. Thanks, everyone. We'll be adjourned for today.
Thanks.
Yep. Goodbye.